My name is Shannon McPhail. I am the Executive Director of the Skeena Watershed Conservation Coalition, which is an organization that was founded 12 years ago now by a bunch of local yokels in the Skeena watershed out of a desire to see regional and local voices included more in decision making. So when it comes to major decisions that will impact the people who live here, we believe as the people who live here, we should be the ones making those decisions. Recently there's been an approval of the Petronas Pacific Northwest LNG project, and we were really devastated because we felt really betrayed by Justin Trudeau, Catherine McKenna, and the ministers responsible for approving this project. Everything that Trudeau and his ministers campaigned on was completely thrown out the door with the approval of this project. This project was going to be the measuring stick. This was where the rubber was going to meet the road, where it was described as Trudeau's watershed moment. He had talked about climate emissions. Well, this project was going to be the #1 polluter of greenhouse gas emissions in Canada. They talked about evidence-based decision-making, but the evidence was overwhelming. And it was overwhelming that it would harm our wild salmon, which is a $110 million industry for the Skeena. So every 9 years, that's $1 billion to our local economy. This is fracking. That's where the liquefied natural gas will come from. So it comes from fracking in Northeast BC. So the First Nations up there and the communities up there will be having to deal with a massive increase in the fracking industry. Then the pipeline, which will cross more than 1,000 fish-bearing streams. And then you get to the terminal place in the Skeena estuary, and that's where every single one of our salmon, 100% of our salmon from every tributary of the entire Skeena watershed, the Babine, the Kispiox, the Skeena itself, the Copper, the Kalem, the Sustit, the Sikantine, all these iconic tributaries that make up the Skeena watershed, all of the fish go to that one place. That's the Skeena estuary. And that's precisely where they want to build this plant. We know the resource extraction industry, and we work within it every day. What we are not interested in is the kind of industry that's going to sacrifice our existing economies. Like I said, wild salmon contribute $110 million. There are other economies like guide outfitting, $28 million a year, wild mushrooms, $21 million a year. Tourism in northern BC is a $1 billion industry each and every year. Those are the economies that are being put at risk. Those are the economies that provide local jobs, that put the money back into our communities, not to some foreign shareholder in another country with a company that has an atrocious human rights record, an atrocious environmental record, who says they're going to use temporary foreign workers, almost half, 40%, to build this project. I think that's BS. That is not good decision making, and the people who live here are going to be left with the consequences of these decisions. There were more than 135 scientists who penned a letter to Trudeau and his cabinet warning about the flaws in the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency's process that eventually led to the approval of this project. Even in the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency's report, they said that there will be significant adverse impacts that are not mitigable, which means they can't, there's no way possible to make up for the impacts that they're going to have on a number of different fronts, one being climate, the other being porpoises and whales, and then the impacts to salmon. What we saw come out of that decision with those 135 scientists, and I should point out that some of those scientists currently work for the BC government, currently work for Christy Clark. They are her scientists who signed this letter. They are scientists who currently work for the federal government. The former DFO head of Habitat signed that letter. Some of the scientists who literally wrote the textbooks on fisheries management and fisheries biology signed that letter. These were the who's who in the world of salmon biology that wrote this, and they went ignored. Simon Fraser University, Skeena Fisheries Commission, and a number of different consultants and scientists who have decades and decades of history working in the Skeena estuary, their science was disregarded. And the only science that was included to make the decision to approve the Petronas Pacific Northwest LNG project was that science that was paid for by the proponent. You want to talk, energy security, all the more reason to keep gas for Canadians. Our natural gas should be for Canada. Dr. David Hughes, who is a geoscientist for more than 30 years with the Geological Survey of Canada, he's sent out several warnings saying we don't have enough gas, even in the short term, to supply our domestic needs in Canada. This is about energy security. So when you add LNG to the mix, we're exporting what we are going to need to import from somewhere else. Pacific Northwest LNG was a really bad decision by our federal government. They simply didn't use the very things that they campaigned on, that they wrote in their mandate letters, which was evidence-based decision-making, climate action, and most importantly, their relationship with First Nations, which our Prime Minister said was his most important relationship. Well, if this is how he treats his most important relationship, then there's not much hope for the rest of Canada to think that we're going to have any kind of positive relationship with our Prime Minister. And I hope that I'm wrong. I hope that he just had a lapse in judgment. I want to believe that that's what happened. I want to believe that the leader of our country stands with us, that he has chosen us, that he hasn't chosen a foreign company to invade our watershed.